My name is Lucas Bennett, and I'm here to share something that changed my life forever. If you've ever felt the crushing weight of uncertainty in our chaotic world, or questioned whether there's more to life than the daily grind, my story might be the answer you're seeking. It's about hope, truth, and a warning we can't afford to ignore. I live in a small, quiet town in the United States. At 30 years old, my life was as ordinary as anyone's: struggles with rising costs, work stress, and a constant search for meaning in an unpredictable world. But one seemingly normal evening turned into the most extraordinary moment of my life. I was sitting at the dinner table with my family, talking about mundane things, when I suddenly felt an intense, crushing pressure in my chest. My vision blurred, and before I could say anything, everything went black. I collapsed onto the floor. My parents rushed to my side, panicked and desperate. My sister frantically called 911 as my heartbeat faded into nothingness. For 8 minutes, I was clinically dead. In those 8 minutes, I experienced something so vivid, so undeniable, that it changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and faith. It wasn't a hallucination, a dream, or a figment of my imagination. It was a revelation. I returned to share a message from Jesus himself, a glimpse into what awaits us and a warning about the year 2025. The first thing I remember after collapsing was a sensation of weightlessness. I was floating above my body, watching the chaos unfold below me. My mother was crying, clutching my lifeless hand, while my father shouted into the phone, begging the emergency responders to hurry. My sister knelt nearby, her hands clasped in prayer, whispering the words she'd learned in Sunday school. It was surreal to see them in such pain, yet I felt no fear or sadness. Instead, I was enveloped in an indescribable peace. Everything around me seemed muted, as though I had stepped into a different dimension. The sounds of the world below faded, and I became aware of a gentle force pulling me upward. I surrendered to it, feeling lighter and freer with each passing moment. I found myself moving through a tunnel of shimmering light. It was warm, inviting, and alive with an energy I had never experienced. Whispers surrounded me, gentle voices that seemed to speak directly to my soul. "You are not done yet," one voice said. "Remember what you see," said another. Confusion and awe filled my mind. Why was this happening? Why me? The light at the end of the tunnel grew brighter and more radiant, drawing me in. The darkness of the world faded entirely, replaced by a golden expanse that shimmered like sunlight on water. It was beautiful, peaceful, and beyond anything I could have ever imagined. And then, I felt his presence. Though I couldn't see him at first, I knew immediately who it was. Jesus. His love and authority filled the space, wrapping around me like the warmest embrace. The light seemed to emanate from him, touching every corner of my soul. As he stepped closer, I could feel his overwhelming compassion, his deep sorrow for the state of the world, and his hope for what could still be. He spoke, not with words as we know them, but directly to my soul. "You have been brought here for a reason," he said. "What you are about to see must be shared. The world needs to know and prepare." At that moment, I realized why I had been chosen. My life wasn't just mine anymore. It was part of a greater purpose. What I saw next was a vision of what is to come in 2025, and it's a message I must share with you. The sky stretched endlessly, brilliant and radiant, filling me with an overwhelming sense of peace and joy. I felt lighter than air, as if I had finally come home to a place where I truly belonged. As I stood marveling at the beauty of this realm, I noticed a figure walking toward me. At first, the light surrounding him was so radiant that I couldn't make out any details. But as he drew closer, the truth became clear: it was Jesus. Jesus appeared both humble and powerful, dressed in flowing white robes that radiated pure light. His presence was overwhelming, yet I felt no fear, only love. He smiled warmly and spoke to me in a voice that resonated with both authority and kindness. "Lucas, my child," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You are here because you have been chosen to carry an important message." Suddenly, visions began to unfold all around me, like scenes from a living tapestry. I saw Earth as we know it: cities, forests, and oceans. But something was terribly wrong. Fires raged, floods consumed entire towns, and people fought against each other in chaos. The heartbreak of these images brought tears to my eyes. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked Jesus, my voice trembling. He replied, "These are visions of a world that has forgotten love, faith, and unity. But there is still time. You must tell them to prepare, to turn their hearts back to God and to one another. Only through faith, kindness, and forgiveness can they overcome what lies ahead." Though my heart felt heavy, Jesus reassured me, "Do not be afraid. You are never alone. I am always with you." He placed his hand over my heart, and a warmth spread through my entire being, renewing my strength and resolve. I felt ready to return to Earth, no matter how difficult it might be to share what I had seen. The visions of Earth's future. The scenes Jesus showed me were both heartbreaking and urgent. Cities once teeming with life appeared dark and abandoned. Their buildings crumbled. Flooded streets forced people to flee for shelter, while powerful storms raged across the land. I saw wildfires consuming forests and homes, leaving families crying out in desperation. In one vision, a massive hurricane swept through the southern states of the U.S., devastating entire communities. In another, wildfires tore through the West, their flames swallowing forests and neighborhoods alike. Families clung to one another, their faces etched with fear and sorrow. "These challenges are not punishments," Jesus explained, "but wake-up calls. They are meant to reconnect humanity with faith, unity, and kindness." Yet, the most troubling vision wasn't of natural disasters, but of humanity itself. I saw division spreading like wildfire, people turning against each other, choosing anger and hatred over love. "Society's greatest threat is not external," Jesus said, "but internal. People have forgotten what matters most, but they can still change." A message of redemption and hope. Overwhelmed with sadness, I turned to Jesus and asked, "Is it too late? Can we change what is coming?" His expression softened, and he spoke with a voice filled with compassion and hope. "No, my child, it is not too late," he said gently. "Every challenge you have seen can be overcome. Redemption is always possible for those who seek it." At that moment, the visions shifted. Where there had been darkness and despair, I now saw light and hope. I witnessed people from every nation coming together in unity. They were helping one another, showing kindness and compassion even in the face of hardship. Families reunited, communities rebuilt, and faith was rekindled. The air was filled with prayer and worship, transcending language and culture. "This is the power of love and faith," Jesus said. "This is the path to redemption." The final vision filled me with awe, a world transformed not by miracles but by the simple, profound choices of individuals choosing faith over fear, kindness over hatred, and hope over despair. As Jesus prepared to send me back, he looked at me with a love and urgency I will never forget. "You must share what you have seen. The world needs to know. They must prepare, turn back to me, and stand firm in truth." I returned to Earth with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing the message I carry is one of hope, redemption, and the unshakable power of faith. It's a message for all of us, a call to act before it's too late. As I stood there, Taking in the overwhelming beauty of everything around me, I began to see scenes unfold before my eyes. They were vivid, clear, and impossible to ignore. Jesus stood beside me, his presence both comforting and commanding, as he showed me what was to come. The first thing I saw was communities coming together after unimaginable hardships. People were rebuilding homes, offering support to one another, and praying as one unified group. Neighbors who had once been strangers were now embracing each other like family. They shared whatever they had: food, shelter, and kindness. And before my eyes, miracles began to unfold. One image remains etched in my mind: a family who had lost everything in a fire. They stood hand in hand, surrounded by others offering food and warmth. Despite their loss, they smiled, radiating gratitude for the love surrounding them. Jesus turned to me and said, "This is the power of unity. Love is the antidote to fear, and faith is the bridge to salvation." I then saw hospitals, places I'm deeply familiar with, transformed in ways that filled me with awe. Patients who were gravely ill began to heal in ways that defied explanation. Doctors and nurses gathered to pray before surgeries, and the outcomes left everyone stunned. In another vision, entire communities knelt in fields to pray. As their prayers rose, dark clouds parted, and sunlight poured down, renewing the land and lifting the spirits of everyone there. Jesus looked at me and said, "Prayer is powerful. It opens hearts, shifts energies, and invites miracles." Then he showed me individuals who had been consumed by anger or hopelessness but were now transformed. I saw people finding peace through faith and forgiveness, enemies reconciled, families reunited, and people who had once felt lost discovered a new sense of purpose. Former adversaries hugged as friends, and families healed years of conflict with one another. Jesus turned to me again and said, "Tell them that each person carries the power to heal, not only themselves but the world, through acts of love, kindness, and forgiveness. They have the ability to create a new future." As I continued to watch these scenes unfold, I realized that the destruction I had been shown earlier wasn't punishment. Jesus explained that the storms, fires, and conflicts weren't meant to harm but to awaken humanity, to remind us of what truly matters. "Adversity reveals the strength of the human spirit," he said. "It is in the darkest moments that people have the chance to shine their brightest." Finally, Jesus spoke to me about the importance of personal faith. "Each soul must turn inward and reconnect with me," he said. "Faith doesn't mean a life without hardship, but it gives you the strength to endure, to overcome, and to bring light into the darkness." As the last vision faded, I felt a deep sense of peace and hope. The future wasn't set in stone. Humanity could change, rise above its challenges, and rewrite its destiny. Jesus looked at me with love in his eyes and said, "Share this message with courage and love. Remind them that I am with them always." Those words wrapped around me like a shield, giving me strength. Yet my heart ached to stay. Heaven felt like home, a place of endless love and peace. With tears in my eyes, I asked Jesus, "Do I have to go back?" He smiled kindly and placed his hand over my heart. "Your time here is not yet," he said. "The world needs you. You are my messenger. Share what you have seen, and do not be afraid." I looked around one last time, taking in the beauty of heaven, the sound of angelic songs that seemed to heal my soul. Jesus stepped back, and I felt myself being pulled away. The light began to fade, replaced by a sensation of weight and heaviness. The angelic songs grew faint until there was silence. Suddenly, I jolted awake, gasping for air. My chest heaved as my lungs filled with breath, and I opened my eyes to find myself in a hospital bed, surrounded by frantic doctors and the beeping of machines. I had returned, but I wasn't the same. Everything I had seen and felt was now a part of me, and I knew my purpose: to share what I had witnessed, to remind people of the love, hope, and unity that can still save us. Jesus' words echoed in my heart. You are never alone. I am always with you. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was my mom's face, hovering over me. Her eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "You're back." Her voice trembled, and she hugged me tightly as if she couldn't believe it was real. Around us, doctors and nurses stood frozen, staring at the monitor that now displayed my steady heartbeat. "It's impossible," one of the doctors muttered under his breath. I could feel the heaviness in my body, the weakness that lingered from everything that had happened. But my mind was clear, sharper than it had ever been. I knew where I had been, and I knew why I had come back. "Mom," I said, my voice barely audible, "I saw Jesus." Her grip on me tightened, and her expression shifted from relief to astonishment. "What did he say?" she asked, her voice trembling as fresh tears rolled down her face. Taking a deep breath, I began to recount everything: the tunnel of light, the radiant beauty of heaven, and the overwhelming presence of Jesus. I described the visions he had shown me: storms, floods, fires, and people turning against one another. But I also shared the hope he had given me. Jesus said the world can still change, I explained, but we have to love each other again. We have to forgive and help one another, or things will only get worse. The room fell silent. My mother hung on to every word, but I could see the doubt in the eyes of the doctors and nurses. To them, I was just a young man who had been clinically dead for 8 minutes, likely hallucinating due to trauma. Yet my mom believed me. I could see it in her eyes. She knew I was telling the truth. As the days passed, I shared my story with anyone who would listen. Some people dismissed it as the ramblings of someone who had gone through a traumatic event, but others believed me. They felt the truth in my words, and they began to act on them. Jesus said it's not too late, I told them. We need to love, forgive, and turn back to faith. Only then can we overcome what's coming. My family believed me completely. They saw the change in me: a calmness, a certainty, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. I wasn't the same person I had been before that moment. I carried a faith and a message of hope that I knew wasn't just for me, but for the world. Soon, something extraordinary began to happen. As my story spread, people began to experience their own small miracles. Across the country and even in other parts of the world, lives were changing in ways that confirmed what Jesus had shown me. In one instance, a single mother who had been struggling financially came across my story online. Inspired, she began praying daily, asking for strength and guidance. Just days later, she received an unexpected job offer that allowed her to provide for her children. It was as if God heard me for the first time, she said. Lucas's story reminded me to believe again. In a town devastated by severe flooding, neighbors who had barely spoken to one another before came together to rebuild homes, share food, and offer comfort. What once was a divided community became a family, united by faith and love. Everywhere I turned, people were finding strength in the message I had been given. It wasn't about me. It was about what Jesus had shared through me. It was about showing the world that even in the face of darkness, there is light. Even in chaos, there is hope. The message was clear: we can change the future. We can choose love over fear, forgiveness over anger, and faith over despair. The choice is ours, but we must act now. The power of unity and love began to ripple through communities. A volunteer once said, "We're stronger when we're united. Love can heal anything." as more people shared their experiences. Miraculous recoveries, unexpected opportunities, and profound spiritual connections. It became clear that something transformative was happening. Those who took the time to reflect on their lives and turn back to faith found themselves changed in ways they hadn't thought possible. One unforgettable moment involved a man who had lost his faith after the death of his wife. After years of bitterness and grief, he decided to visit a church for the first time in ages. Sitting quietly in the pew, he prayed for a sign. A week later, he found himself at a community service event where strangers greeted him with kindness and open arms. It was like I'd been asleep for years, and I finally woke up, he later said. God hasn't abandoned us. We just stopped listening. These events spread like ripples across the country, inspiring others to take action. Prayer groups grew larger, churches overflowed with worshipers, and social media buzzed with messages of hope and encouragement. Phrases like "change starts with us" and "Jesus is always near" became rallying cries for a movement of faith and unity. What struck people the most wasn't grand gestures or dramatic miracles. It was the simplicity of the message. Love one another, forgive, and reconnect with faith. Small, everyday acts of kindness began to transform lives. Helping a neighbor, mending broken relationships, and choosing compassion over conflict. Jesus had said, "Even the smallest act of love can change the world," and that truth began to manifest everywhere. Families that had been torn apart by anger and resentment started to reconcile. Individuals trapped in cycles of despair and fear began to experience peace. The miracles weren't always grand, but they were undeniable. And for those who experienced them, they were life-changing. Even skeptics couldn't ignore the growing wave of hope and transformation. Reporters, scientists, and theologians debated the story, trying to explain the unexplainable. But no one could deny the impact it was having on people's lives. Whether you believe in heaven or not, you can't argue with the hope this has given people, one journalist remarked. Through it all, I remained focused on the mission I had been given. This wasn't about me, it was about all of us coming together. I shared the message Jesus had entrusted to me. Do not be afraid. Love one another, and I will be with you. The signs and miracles that followed were undeniable proof that the message wasn't just a story. It was a call to action. Those who chose to listen found their faith renewed and their hearts filled with hope. Love is stronger than fear, one pastor said. Faith can move mountains. In the weeks and months that followed, the message spread far beyond anything I could have imagined. Churches saw an influx of people seeking connection and purpose. Divided communities came together to rebuild and support one another. Schools began emphasizing kindness and empathy as core values, and families prioritized love and forgiveness. But the journey wasn't without challenges. Some dismissed the message as the result of an overactive imagination. Others ridiculed it, accusing me of fear-mongering. Still, I never wavered. I simply repeated the words I had been given. Do not be afraid. Love one another. As time passed, the warnings I had shared began to unfold. The storms, natural disasters, and conflicts I had described became impossible to ignore. Yet those who had listened and prepared found themselves stronger, more united, and more resilient. The message became a legacy, a reminder that no matter how dark the world may seem, there is always light to guide the way. The future isn't fixed. We have the power to change it. But we must start now. People across the world began to share the message, spreading love and faith like a flame that could not be extinguished. One woman put it perfectly, hope isn't lost. We just have to believe in it again. Though my journey was far from over, I knew I had been given a second chance to inspire, to remind people of what truly matters: faith, love, and unity. In the end, This story wasn't just about visions or warnings. It was about redemption, hope, and the assurance that we are never truly alone. Jesus' words echoed in my heart and the hearts of everyone who listened. Love one another, and I will be with you always. That promise continues to guide us all. It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the power of faith, and the possibility of a brighter, united future.